So, good evening to all known faces and new faces. Welcome to our discussion evening with our great guest, Aron Ra, known atheist from Texas. So he was so great and accepted our invitation to our small community in Prague, and we will be discussing all topics that Aron Ra is known for, like his Mormonism, creationism and evolution education in America, and also missions of American evangelics in Europe, especially here in Prague. So, my name is Kopecký, and I am a PhD student of evolutionary biology, and my research topic is human morality and moral cognition. And I will be asking this evening Aron Ra some questions, let's say about 45 minutes, and we'll be discussing these topics, and yet another 45 minutes will be dedicated just to you, so you can ask whatever is relevant to these topics. And if there will be some technical issues like hearing or microphone too loud or light quality here too dark, just say it during our discussion. Great. So, Aron, I introduced you like atheist in Texas, which is the America of America. And I would like to open our discussion with some light topics. How it's like to be the atheist in Austin, in the America of America.
Well, I'm not in Austin, unfortunately. I'm in Dallas. Yeah.
Hello?
Okay. Yeah, I'm in Dallas. Everybody in Texas wants to live in Austin, or at least all of the blue people want to be in Austin. All the progressive people want to be in Austin. That's where all the progressive people in Texas are. I'm in one of the outposts where we're not that way. Where it's, there are, in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, there are quite a few different atheist groups. There's a coalition of, I think, a couple of dozen different groups that are atheist and secularists and epistemists and so forth. The Dallas-Fort Worth Coalition of Reason. But we're grossly outnumbered, even though we've got a couple dozen different groups. To give you an idea, the neighborhood that I live in, we have skinhead Christians. We have people who have, when my son was walking around in the neighborhood, you know, he wore a Harry Potter t-shirt one day, and I found one of the neighbors holding a Bible against his forehead, saying, "I rebuke thee, I rebuke thee, I rebuke thee." On another occasion, he was treed because neighborhood children were casting things at him because I don't remember what the t-shirt was that they were objecting to that day, but they had this huge issue with the fact that my son, a little boy, wasn't a believer. And somebody, one of my neighbors, accosted him one day saying, "You're going to go to hell for that." And he obviously didn't show any real concern about going to hell. He said, "Don't you believe in God?" And he honestly answered, "No." And she treated it like a medical emergency. She ran into the house to get her husband, and he was the one that came out to try to cast the spell with the Bible, you know. So this is the neighborhood that we live in, where 20% of our science teachers in high school are creationists who argue that the world is less than 10,000 years old. And they argue against not just evolution, they argue against climate change, they argue against everything that their church tells them to argue against. And their church is intertwined inextricably with the political process, which is run by big oil, which it's a ridiculous conglomeration of things. You see, we have people that are leading our state and our communities who believe in dominionism, which is that Christians are supposed to take over the entire world. But very briefly, because they all believe that these are the end times. And I can't understand why people would vote for somebody like Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz or Rick Perry, because why would you elect somebody to secure your future when they don't believe you have one? When they think there is literally no tomorrow. So we don't have a lot of reasonable people in our midst. If you're a teacher and you're in Texas, you have to be very careful about what you teach, even if it's required in the curricula that you teach evolution, even if it's required in the curricula that you teach things about deep time, about things happening millions of years ago. Even if you're teaching cosmology, anything that violates their interpretation of their favorite storybook, you will get trouble from the students who are trained by the students. I'm not kidding about this. The students are trained by their church groups to disrupt the class. If you say the word evolution or any of these other trigger words, there's a few of them, then they will disrupt the class with citations of pseudoscience and logical fallacies. And if you get past that, then you get the letters from the parents who are angry that you tried to teach forbidden knowledge. And if you get past that, you may risk reactions from your associates and your administrators. And we know that at least a few teachers have been fired in Texas just for teaching evolution, even though that's part of the job description.
Thank you. That's the quite striking story. It's quite unimaginable for somebody from Central Europe just to talk about topics you cannot touch in your classroom, where usually should be some at least freedom of scientific inquiry for the teachers. From your CV, I found that you used to be a Mormon or member of that church, so you been born to that family, and I know from documentaries and stories that it's quite hard to remain connected with the families that are still in the church if you leave them.
Yeah, well, the Mormons have you as soon as you're baptized. And they don't ever have, there's not a way to get out of them. They don't provide a way to get out of their church. You have to make these formal documents to declare that you are no longer a part of the Mormon church. Usually the only reason they would let you go is if you've declared some other religion, and they don't recognize atheism as a religion, so there's no way to just walk out of it. I've had Mormon missionaries show up to my door several times in the last decade or so because I'm still on their books. They baptized me at 8 years old, and so they think they've got me. And they go, well, we haven't seen you at service. Well, come on in and I'll explain to you why. They actually sent a half a dozen Mormon missionaries to my house just to listen to me lecture, which I thought was amazing, because they didn't tell me anything. They just came to listen to me talk. But the Mormon practice, they had this tradition where they don't indoctrinate you until you reach the age of reason, which they've arbitrarily decided was 8 years old. By that time, I had already gotten a dinosaur book that had a cladogram in it from my second grade science teacher. And so when my mother came in and showed me the Bible, said, "This is the absolute truth of God." And I was like, "No, it isn't. See what it says here?" There was a problem already in my indoctrination. But as I said, they don't let you go unless you make a formal declaration of that. And they've started an organization in the United States for people who were former Mormons. They call them Formans. And on one particular day, there were, I think, thousands of people who formally resigned from the Mormon Church all at the same time, on the same day, because the Church of Latter-day Saints took an offensive position with regard to homosexuals. And I think it's interesting the way that religion is supposed to rule the world, because religion really follows after trends. And there's a joke that I heard where I must hurry and catch up with them, for I am their leader. And that's the way I see religion. I mean, this is why the Pope, right? The Pope even said that atheists can go to heaven. And then his underlings come and say, no, His Infallible Eminence misspoke. And then he said it again 2 years later.
Well, thank you for the description of the Mormons. So we, if you are living in Prague, you kind of miss them around the underground. And they are the true missionaries at age about 20. They came here, I think, what is the age when the Mormons have to go on their mission?
I think it's 18.
18, right? So they came here and they start learning Czech for 2 years. And after it, they get their dress, the names, and they are contacting the people on the streets in Czech language. So once I brought one missionary to tears, so I asked him, you are from Utah, right? He said, right, I am. So your parents and all your friends are Mormons, right? Right. So, and if you left your faith, your family will kick out you from your house. He agreed. So, and we came all. We went through all the topics like magic underwear and theory of evolution and Jewish Indians in America and so on. So, but one theory I heard on podcast from St. Andrews, the thinking atheist, was that the young Mormons actually do not have any other chance than to be a missionary in Europe. It's still better than a missionary in Africa, right? And they are trying to be the worst possible missionaries in the world because they don't believe in such a thing. Is it possible even for young Mormons to escape their faith just on their own?
Okay, so you're telling me that the Mormons that are coming here as missionaries are trying to be the worst Mormons that they can be?
Well, it seems to me that some of them...
No. When they try to be good at it, they still suck. Okay. When I was 14 years old, and my mother wanted me to read the Book of Mormon, right? And I argued with her that the Book of Mormon is based on the Bible, and if I have huge problems with the Bible, then the Bible is the foundation for the Book of Mormon, and the Quran, and a couple of other things. But if the Bible collapses, then all of the houses built on it will collapse too. And I started to criticize Mormonism, and she said, well, you don't know anything about my religion, and you're being a hypocrite if you criticize something you don't know about. And I said, you know what? You're right. Go ahead and bring the missionaries over, and I'll talk to them. And I don't know why they call kids, 18-year-old kids, elders. It's just one of the many things that the Mormons get, or the religion in general just gets backwards. So they bring over these kids. And I'm only 14 myself, right? So I'm 4 years younger than the people that are talking to me. And they tell me these pretty outrageous things. And now, when I was 14, you got to remember, it was like 1978, okay? So this was before the Mormon Church changed their stance, because they did make a significant change in their stance. It started to allow black members. Now, why they had not previously allowed black members was because they had this policy that, or this belief, that black skin was the mark of the devil, laid upon Cain by God when Cain wanted to. They didn't say anything about the global flood and how they certified that. It didn't go into all of that. But that was their belief, and they changed that in 1979. So in 1978, they're telling me about black skin being the mark of the devil. And I'm challenging them. How do you know that it's black skin? Where does it say that it's black skin? When it says, oh, well, in our scriptures, it says that you would recognize it a mile away. I said, well, I'm dating a girl who's part Mexican and part black, and I didn't know that she was black, you know. But I'm dating this other girl who's Japanese. Her you can tell a mile away. So how do you know that's not the trait? That it's the mark of the devil? They just dance around. They make up whatever they want to believe, and they simply assert it as if they know better, right? And then we started talking about things that I don't think that they've actually examined their belief. They talk about how God had a body. So, so God has a body, and God and Jesus are separate, by the way. So Joseph Smith had a vision where Jesus and God appeared to him side by side. And I say, okay, that's great. So we've got a God that created 11 jillion galaxies, and his arms reach this far. And he has nipples. And a pancreas. Why? What does he need lungs for? How many worlds do you really need lungs for? And what does he do with his body? Does he keep it in a tarp under the garage except on Sundays when he wants to get it out and take it to Earth? You know, because what's the purpose in existing everywhere and every when and having this limited capacity? But as I said, they believe in a very simple, primitive type of mythology. And they don't really care about understanding the way things really are. And they certainly aren't about looking at the big picture.
There is always the same answer, and then there is magic. Magic happen, and
now they will argue that they don't believe in magic, but if you ever get into a religious discussion, understand that the word magic has exactly the same definition as the word miracle. They are both the evocation of supernatural forces or entities to control or forecast natural events in ways which are inexplicable by science because they defy the laws of nature. That covers both words. They believe in magic, they just won't admit it.
So, and how is it possible in respectful ways to individual beliefs to educate young people or young kids in Texas school about the natural world, like natural history, that there are some old cultures, that there are some evolutionary older forms of humans than we are. On the one hand, it's quite respectful to just respect the beliefs of the parents and do not push some political or different type of agenda in the schools. But on the other hand, we kind of have to teach the best science we have to the kids. So how is solved this type of dilemma in the American schooling system, in theory and in praxis?
Well, at the middle school and high school level, it's a complete failure. There are very few teachers that actually understand evolution, for example. So I mean, most of them couldn't teach it if they tried, at least not correctly, and it's just about as bad. If you can't teach evolution correctly, don't teach it at all. But there's a double standard wherein, if you're taking a Bible study class, as they often do in Texas, they'll have the Bible as literature or some other loophole where they can read stories out of the Bible to the students, and they will treat it as if it's literal, actual, factual history. And these lessons include the denigration of other religions, anti-Semitism, the instilling right-wing political ideologies, all of that. But we are considered rude if we give the facts that we know to be true of evolution. That's considered somehow overstepping our bounds. But if we have Jewish or Muslim kids in a classroom where that's doing a requirement of Bible study, we can go ahead and criticize their religions and their ethnic background, and that's fine. But you can't talk about Australopithecus, because that's offensive. And I've actually had people tell me that when I present a case or an argument or evidence that stands against what they always believed, I mean, like the great argument, where they say that there's never been any transitional species. That's easy to disprove, right? Or that there's never been any beneficial mutations. Either example. There are hundreds of example answers. We give the definition of what it is, so this is how we would recognize what it is, and here are the hundreds of examples to answer that. I am criticized for being truthful about that, and I'm being told that I'm hurting people. People who just want to believe what they want to believe. And why won't you let me believe what I want to believe? And these may be what the facts are, but I prefer to believe this. So it's a make-believe world. They want to live in pretend land. And I'm not even exaggerating. It literally is make-believe. It really is pretend. And on some level, a lot of these believers, not all of them, because some of them are so inert. They've been raised in this belief, and they know that everybody around them believes that, so they've never questioned it because everybody else believes it, so it must be true, right? But if you start to challenge these people, you'll realize that there's certain cues that they give where you know that they know that on some level that it's not really true, and that they don't want to know what is really true. So if you had a time machine, and you and some young Earth creationist can jump into this time machine together and go back to 10 million years ago, I suspect, my hypothesis is that that young Earth creationist would come up with some excuse not to go because he already knows that what he believes is bullshit. And he doesn't want to be put in a position where he has to admit that.
Well, that's the America of America, as we been talking. But in Czech Republic, the consensus is that, of course, that evolution happened, and we can teach on our secondary schools whatever we want, and that there is nobody who is actually creationist or who is pushing his own religious agenda. But the evidence is quite different. Some of the Czech churches with the money from America, especially Adventist, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, has own agencies about lifestyle, about learning English, but it consists some religious agenda plus education about Bible and creationism. 2 weeks later, Petr Tomek and the other member of our group, the atheists and the skeptics, attended on Czech public school. It was not a religious school, but a public school in a town called Písek. 2 weeks long exposition of how science proved that the Earth is just a few thousand years old, that all dinosaurs were killed during the flood, and the evolution seems to be problematic. So, not God did it, but some miracles had to occur on Czech public school from the Adventist Church, and that was quite new for Czech skeptics, for our concept. So what we should do about it?
You've mentioned that you're aware of what the Gish Gallop is a little bit earlier. The Gish Gallop, for those who do not know, is a tactic that the religious believers will use. When I'm saying the religious believers, I mean creationism is a form of religious extremism because it requires a degree of reality denial. Every creationist organization there is posts a statement of faith as if this were something to be proud of, wherein they admit that they will automatically and thoughtlessly reject any and all evidence that might ever arise should it conflict with their interpretation of Bronze Age folklore. So that no matter how true the truth really is, no amount of proof will ever change their minds. So what they will do with the Gish Gallop, named after Duane Gish of the Institute for Creation Research, is they will throw out a whole bunch of nonsense at once. So many lies that you couldn't possibly refute them all in the time that you have. But whenever you possibly can, especially when they're going to be teaching lessons in school, you need to have a very public venue where you can take each claim, and let's focus just on this first claim. The dinosaurs killed the flood thing, right? We know there was no flood. It's not that we just don't have evidence that there was a flood. We have evidence that there was not a flood. And we've got buckets of it all around the world. We know there was no damn flood. We know that geology disproves the flood. Meteorology disproves the flood. Mythology disproves the flood. Anthropology, zoology, all these different fields we can cover. We can go into detail, but if they want to make that one claim, we can attack that one claim. And don't let them off of it, because they're going to want to change the subject. Once upon a time, I ran into some Islamic creationists, and I happened to be with a developmental biologist. And so they started hitting him with questions. They didn't know what his field of study was. So they're starting talking about embryology in the Quran, right? And so he starts refuting them. And then as soon as they realize that he was, oh my gosh, you're an embryologist? Whoops, wrong guy to talk to. Let's change the subject to geology. Let's find the thing the guy doesn't know. Sorry, geology major next to him, right? So that was not a good day.
Well, we have the Atlas of Creation from the Muslim creationists on our department too. They produced tens of thousands of the great big books with nice flashy images and sent it to all the universities with science department. And it's quite funny book.
Are we talking about Harun Yahya?
I don't know the name, but it's a Turkish guy. I think
That's Adnan Akhtar, also known as Harun Yahya. He's made a life's work out of trying to usurp science. And I've seen some of his video lessons. They're deplorably bad. He steals the young earth creationist arguments from America and then rebrands them to put Allah on it. But they're just as bad when he does them.
And the most funny picture from the book, as I think Richard Dawkins pointed out, that there are two types of insects, and the book is saying something like before 1,000 years the insect looks the same way as it looks now, but the prehistoric insect, it's not a fossil, but it's a fishing bait. Yeah, the hook for fishing in shape of some insect. So that they used extremely wrong images in that book.
Okay, so let's look at some insects do have a very similar body style to what they had way back in the Cambrian, right? I mean, let's look at scorpions, for example, which aren't quite back to the Cambrian, but scorpions are very, very ancient. Way before any land animal, we had recognizable scorpions. So people say that they didn't evolve, except that we have 7,500 species of them. Yeah, they evolved. It's not that they keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger or trying to turn into something else, which is the creationist misrepresentation of them. Evolution is an explanation of biodiversity, and that means that you change into many different subgroups. So on insects, for example, we have more. If you look at the way that arthropods are done, and I'm really about systematic classification of life, so I get really nerdy about this kind of thing, and I'm sorry to bore you all. But if you just look at the breadth of the different types of insects that we have, this just a vast number of different types, and the way that they are groups within groups within groups in the nucleidistic classification system. This is all indication of a random evolutionary process, clearly not any kind of an implication of a divine designer. At no point is there anything that looks like intelligent design anywhere in life. At best, if you wanted to argue about intelligent design, then we have a number of different competing committees, all trying to compete with each other. And I wrote an article about this once upon a time, where you have different groups that are trying to, you have the people that are designing the faster Impala in order to outrun the faster cheetah. And so we have different committees working to this end. But at no point do we have anything like a divine designer. We never have a mechanism for it. There's nothing to explain how this divine designer even exists, much less how he does anything. And all of this, as I said, is inextricable from the mythology. So if you got into an argument with a creationist and say, okay, you can argue any scientific pseudoscience you want, but first we're going to agree that this is all mythology. The Bible is mythology. Snakes can't talk, no matter what. Okay? And neither can donkeys. And we don't have people walking around with wings growing out of their backs. That can't happen either. All of that is hocus pocus, mumbo jumbo. And now let's talk about science. But as I said, with creationism, it is a denial of reality in favor of an interpretation of their storybook. So they can't distinguish doctrine from dogma. They literally worship a book.
Fortunately, here in Czech Republic, we have quite good translation of a great book about evolution, and also many of Czech biologists write books about evolution for undergraduates or for the general public. So that's whole discussion topic about creator, it's quite outlandish, or it has no place in our public discussion, so it's not much that interesting. Just about the examples you made are like from not the different continent, but really from different settings of mind. Next topic I would like to ask you is if you could introduce your YouTube channel, or that's the, I suppose you are vlogger, so it's a great part of your not job and hobby in one. What are the topics you are covering in your YouTube channel? You have more than 100,000 subscribers, and on the growing community of YouTube, you are one of the top atheists. So the same number of subscribers has, or a little more if I can say, a Filmason called Thunderfoot, which is actually in Prague.
I do not have more subscribers than Filmason.
Yes, quite. But it's interesting that 2 years before we have first atheistic meeting, and he is working in Prague, Filmason. So he was our guest, and last year we had Richard Dawkins in Olomouc on Academia Film Olomouc. So now it's your turn to introduce your channel and topics you are dealing with.
Well, thank you for giving me an opportunity to plug myself. Okay, so what I do with my video channel is every month we'll have a couple of videos which are on the Raw Men podcast. And what I try to do is try to interview progressive people. Anybody can complain, you know, about and shoot down everybody's idea, you know, on what can be done to fix this problem. But I've talked to the people who are taking action to try to fix things. And that gets to be very difficult to find guests for. But I've managed to find activists and inventors and people who have found a resolution and are trying to get things pushed through Congress or what have you that are interesting to speak to. I think one of my first guests was somebody who was convinced that he was an investor, and he was building a hot fusion reactor to try to simulate a quasar so that he could generate the power grid for the world. A very ambitious physicist, and he was a fun interview anyway. So what else we do is I do activism, of course, because we live in a very politicized environment, you know, especially in the United States, especially in the South, especially in Texas. And so I'll have activism videos on my channel, and we also do, my wife and I, my wife is a science teacher, and also a specialist with the next curriculum, or the next generation science standards. So she writes the video scripts for classroom supplement video series that we do for teachers who can't teach evolution or related subjects. And very often teachers won't, even if they understand evolution, even if they accept it and know how to teach it, they very often won't, because they don't want to personally endorse it. But if they just plug in these videos, these are approved by the next generation science standards, these are the national standards, so they can put it in, and they can mark on their roster that they've done what was supported by the national standards, and we can teach the evolutionary aspects and the other things that they might not want to get into. So we do a series of biology videos for middle school and high school level called Living Science Videos. And then beyond that, we are also working on a still as yet unrevealed phylogeny explorer project, which I'm excited about. It's taken forever to work with volunteer engineers. You know, when you're volunteers, you can't whip them. So it's taken a while to put this together, but we are building a phylogenetic database for all of life that can be rendered in a website. Now, there was something like this done once upon a time, but they ran out of funding way back before the human genome was even completed. So we want to do the updated version of that 20 years later. And I don't know what else I could throw out there. I don't sing.
I highly recommend for you to watch the videos about biology. I think that they are quite well informed, and for the each video it's about 25 minutes, give or take. 30 minutes. The biology one I watch on YouTube. That they are full of information, and in 5 years most of the school children would spend more time on YouTube or in electronic media than reading actual books. So I think that this way is would be main means to educate or to get to the younger generation, to inform them about the, well, as you said, in some states in America, forbidden knowledge.
Yeah.
And the other part of your YouTube channel are debates, public debates or debates with creationists. So, and you seems to be quite skilled in the debating. So, I will ask you if you have some prepared arguments for and counter arguments, or what are your favorite discussion that that you recommend us to watch in future from your channel, of course.
Thank you. I've done a few online radio debates. I've done where you put me and Pastor Bob Enyart or Bob Duco or Ray Comfort or somebody like that, and put them on the radio. We would argue back and forth with each other, but that's not a moderated debate. And that's understanding what their weaknesses are and being able to exploit them for an audience. I've yet to do an actual moderated debate, but I've just been scheduled for one. In a few months, we're going to debate on, I love this, whether God is the source of all good. And I opened up with the line when we were negotiating, setting this up. I said, can I just jump to the fact that God doesn't exist and so isn't the source of dick? So you can just start there. But there's a lot of different angles that we can approach from that. I have argued with a lot of these different
apologists.
Yeah, thank you. That was a much more polite word than one. What apologetics is a means of systematically rationalizing or justifying or excusing any evidence that's against your position and finding some excuse or making up some excuse for somehow how you could still be right.
We call it lying for Jesus. That's the name for theology.
Yes, it's making up excuses as you go. Because, as I said, when they have this statement of faith, and this is to me, I mean, it's already, faith, let me put this another way. I identify as an epistemist, which means I object to faith itself. It doesn't matter which faith it is, it's faith itself. Because to me, faith is the most dishonest position it is possible to have. Because it's already dishonest to assert as fact that which is not evidently true. Now, they complain about scientists, because scientists will say, that, well, because of this evidence, we think this is probably what happened. Well, of course, this is an investigation. That's the way you would talk. It's not a belief system. You're not trying to make people believe. But that's what the believers want. They get angry when scientists say, probably, or whatever percent chance of, or whatever, anything that is uncertain, they criticize. We believe because of this evidence that. They want to make sure, they want to be able to assert whatever the hell they want and state that as absolute fact, which we call lying. So that's already the start. It's already dishonest just to start there. But then, when they put in the statement of faith, wherein they say that nothing will ever prove them wrong, that they will have this confirmation bias where they can reject or dismiss anything, I've actually seen people state on video that it's okay to ignore evidence that stands against your assumptions. You just assume that the Bible or the Quran is right, and therefore anything that stands against it is wrong, and you just don't even have to consider it. They think that's honest. I have a different opinion.
Yeah, I see. They are dealing usually with absolute certainty, and if you, the evil scientist, doesn't have something like absolute certainty. You don't know it, so but they do not know anything about statistics and how we in science can infer from some factual evidence the support for our theories. So the debate about how sure you are or following are quite absurd with the theologians.
So they ask if do you believe in absolute truth?
Yeah.
Why do we have
what does it even mean?
Okay, so unidentified truth. I mean, if you look up truth in the dictionary, truth is defined as that which is concordant with reality, which means that reality itself is not truth. It's statements about reality. And how do we know that they are truth? Well, the only way that we can know that it's truth is if we can show that it's true. So I have to interpret that truth is whatever statement about reality we can show to be true. Which means, when somebody comes to you with your belief system, they can throw out all the assertions that they want to, but then you ask, show me the truth of it. Meaning, show me the parts that we can actually show to be true. Which means, there's no truth to any religion.
Well, that's the problem with dictionary definitions. There are many theories of truth in philosophy of science or broader sense in philosophy, and the dictionary definitions are quite well. In philosophy, we are dealing with it in different ways. So I would like to move not to talk about whether it could be the pragmatic or as you said, but to the last topic that would be the most difficult, and also about dictionaries. You said that from the dictionary, who is not the feminist have to be sexist or something like that. That's the
clarify.
Yeah, please clarify it. Yeah.
Clarify. The one and only definition the word feminist ever had,
Okay, yeah.
was someone who believes in the social, political, and economic equality with men, that women should have.
Okay.
So if you look at the definition of the word, that's the only definition. Right? Now people want to argue that there's a different definition. Okay, well show me that there is some collective group that's representative of the feminist movement who uses that definition. Of course nobody can, because there really is only one definition. But the point is, according to the definition of the word, and this was just, I said this kind of as a joke, I mean it's just looking at the definition. So if you take it as somebody who does not believe in it, what does that mean in the reverse? Well, the reverse would mean sexist. If you don't believe that women should have equality, then that means you believe in gender inequality, and that's the definition of feminism. I was expecting a laugh. I was not expecting 3 years worth of constant hate mail.
That's great. That's great that you are explaining what was your intention about it. So, for example, for me, it was quite unclear from the cuts, video cuts from the debate. What was your intention to say to the public? Because we know, or you can just look at the wiki that it's edited by this group, that there are many different groups of feminists. Some of them are saying that we have to crush capitalism. The different one, yeah, you can find it really material feminist there.
What the hell does capitalism got to do with feminism?
Really, there's the system of oppression made by the patriarchy, and if you are not against capitalism, you are not feminist. So you
wait. If you're not capitalist?
No. If you are against capitalism.
If you're against capitalism, then you're not feminist.
If you aren't against capitalism, you cannot be feminist.
Okay, one definition. If you believe that women should have social, economic, and political equality with men, you're feminist. That's it.
Great.
It's just like the definition of atheist.
Okay.
Now we bring it up all the time. If you don't believe in God, you're atheist. And people say, oh, well, just because I don't believe in God doesn't mean I'm atheist. Yeah, it does. But with feminism, I couldn't believe it. As hated as the word atheist is, feminist is hated far worse. Because people will argue, well, maybe according to the definition, which is the only thing that counts, maybe according to the definition of a feminist, but not in any other way. Well, what any other way is there? So and this is a very confusing thing for me, because every single reasonable person I know in every avenue of life proudly identifies as a feminist. And not one of them ever is one of these ridiculous rad femmes that I keep hearing stories about. And I only ever heard stories that they exist. I actually did see a news story where somebody actually did some horrible, rude thing that was in the news, and I could verify that this was something that actually happened, and then they identified as feminists. Okay, so there are shitheads in the feminist movement. But it comes down to me, the only understanding of that word that I know, and you've got to remember, there's another advantage that I have in it, or disadvantage in this case, is that I'm a lot older than a lot of people that you will be hearing from on YouTube.
You are more than twice older than me, so yeah.
Thank you for pointing that out. So when I was a kid, I would hear the exact same arguments against feminism that I hear today, except that it wasn't against feminism, it was against women's libbers. That's what they used to be called back then. And I was always told that they were, sex negative, but in the 1970s version of that word, or that they were man-hating bull dykes. This is the kind of thing. I can hear the same kind of absurd, ridiculous arguments today. It's just labeled feminism instead of.
Okay, that's great. That's great that you are actually you was referring to the vocabulary definition, and that's the problem in social sciences. Whether if you are using some term, you are subscribing to many different ideologies that you are using, or that you are using just the definition in a vocabulary. Now it makes sense to me.
I want to throw out something else since you brought it up, because as I said, when I used the F word, feminist.
Which one? Yeah.
When I described myself using the F word, I mean, it was one time in a video 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Every single video I have ever uploaded since has been barraged with people attacking me for using that label. And the ridiculous accusations that they throw on top of it are just insane. So they think that I have the religion of feminism. What the hell does that even mean? I've drunk the social justice Kool-Aid. That doesn't mean anything either, right? So, I mean, I was very clear what I meant. I believe that, that, and people tell me that I don't know that we're a dimorphic species. So yes, of course I understand that that's why I specify social, political, economic, not biological equality, because I know that can't happen. I understand that the biology of this situation. But the accusations that I have a belief in all of the associated doctrines of patriarchy and whatever other words that I wasn't even familiar with at the time, whether they throw these out there as if I'm supposed to believe and support them, and as if it's a religious position. This is absurd. When I did that presentation, the video that we're talking about is called something about questioning norms.
There was some discussion panels. One panel.
So the issue that I had was, at that time, I was already seeing a hell of a lot of infighting, which I thought was completely unnecessary. There are people who are interested in social justice for completely justifiable reasons. And there are people who object to that. And sometimes they object to it for justifiable reasons. I've seen situations where a feminist suggests something that I think is over the top, and so I would object. No. Like, for example, there was this one conference where somebody had suggested that people, or that the vendors at this atheist conference should be allowed to wear sexualized clothing. And I said, no, that's ridiculous. We're talking about adults, Let them stay within the legal parameters, and they can decide for themselves what borders on good taste or not. There will be social repercussions if they exceed those norms. No problem. But the accusations that people make against me for the attempts at division, I wasn't trying to divide anybody. I literally was giving that presentation to say, shut up already. I said, we are outnumbered and outgunned and outfinanced. We have a common enemy. And what the hell are we fighting against ourselves for? It's like two bighorn sheep crashing in their heads, right? Surrounded by a million wolves. Figure out what the fuck our enemy is, right? Stop. And so I actually asked people in the audience at that time, to please minimize the infighting because it's pointless. And then other people have just escalated beyond that point. And I have been accused of all kinds of ridiculous things about, being a strong advocate of atheism plus.
Yeah.
Which I objected to on video from the very beginning. It doesn't matter, that people wanted to. Because I once identified as a feminist and gave the definition and expressed exactly what I meant, right?
Exactly.
Well, so now I'm being misrepresented as if I'm some kind of mangina or something like that. The accusations are absolutely absurd.
Well, I'm more than happy that you explain it from the beginning to the end, and that's great that we have it on tape. So now anyone who tries to attack you with some, as you said, you are supporter of whatever. Now you in 5 minutes explain everything. So I'm more than satisfied with this question. And now can I finally see clearly what's your position on it? Not that you hasn't provided enough information, but there is a quite big wave of accusation that against you. So thank you very much for explaining it. Really.
I have to tell you that this is the first time in a live conference
that
this has ever come up. Because, as I said, absolutely every single person I ever meet in real life, right, has no problem with this. It's only the people on YouTube that give me hell.
So maybe the reason is that you are first time in Europe, so we are...
No, it's not the first time in Europe.
In Czech Republic, okay, and then
for example,
we are together seeing each other for first time, and the YouTube is the only source we can know your opinion or you as a person.
When I was in London, when I was in Iceland, these people, like Iceland brags that they are the most feminist country in the world. Yeah. They brag that men get paid maternity leave, guaranteed by law, where the United States doesn't even guarantee that for women yet. Because that's kind of what feminism...
No, really?
Really. See, the idea of feminism, this is going to sound strange, this confuses a lot of people, what it was supposed to be. And I understand that there are people who push boundaries that I won't accept. Right? There are people that argue levels of feminism like, to hell with that's not what it means. And I will correct feminists on this, because I think, honestly, there are going to be people who push extremes, and the only way that you're really going to be able to correct that is from within. People who identify as feminists are going to be the ones that have to correct other feminists. Because, and we've seen this from experience, people trying to correct feminism from outside fail constantly. It has to be people from the inside who correct themselves. But it was supposed to be that feminism was about equality. And one of the reason that I did that video, by the way, when I first heard people saying, well, if you're talking about equality for women, what about equality for men? Equality! The hell's your problem? But that really was the argument I was hearing. So when we're talking about equality for women, that doesn't mean chopping men down, right? It means giving women a hand up, right? That's what it was supposed to be. And a lot of people accused feminism being that, you're supposed to cut men down, and it was always about promoting women, but it's not always about promoting women. I can tell you that when I shouldn't probably go into a personal story, but there was a time when I was involved in a family court issue at this particular point in history where in Texas they told me that no lawyer will take the case of a man who's filing for custody of his child because the man always loses. The court always assumes that the woman is going to be the good mother, so they always give custody and you will always pay child support. Now, if she's already filed against you, then they'll take the case, but they'll never take it if you file. But the lawyers told me then that there were feminists protesting that stereotype at that time. And because of the feminist protest in Texas, a few years later, when I found myself testifying for another person in a very similar situation, suddenly we have where it's joint custody for everybody, and they don't automatically give the child to the female, because they had that protest. So it does establish an equality for the sexes, which means that even when it's to the woman's advantage, in this case, because it wasn't equal, they fight for the equality. Now I know that there are rats fans out there that I've never met and I couldn't name. But if I ever did encounter one, I would be happy to correct that person.
Well, thank you for a long and definitely satisfying answer for that.
Thank you. This has been brewing in me for a long time.
well, actually, it was. I know all your opinions from the video, but this one was quite uncertain for the external view that doesn't spend much time to watching all of your work. So thank you for clarifying everything. And
but it still won't stop the hate mail. Watch that.
well, no. Or they found another state as well.
It's a sad thing, and it's the last thing I'm going to say about this. I don't get hate mail from believers, neither Christian nor Muslim. I get volumes from atheists. Always, only, ever, over that. Because I once called myself a feminist. How dare you? That's all the hate mail I get, and I get it forever.
Well, yeah, part of them could be just trolls and spending their miserable life to writing emails.
It was a funny thing. I
mind.
encountered this woman who was a YouTuber herself, and I asked her, because she's an attractive woman, she's a prominent YouTuber, and I asked her, do you get death threats and such? Oh yeah, I get them all the time, but I'm sure you do too. And I said, no. And she goes, you don't? And I said, no. And she goes, why not? And I said, I'm a man. I think that's part of it. And I do think that's part of it. I have seen, because I know a lot of women who are activists, who are political activists, and any time a woman makes a statement or throws a position behind anything, she gets way more and much harsher criticism than men ever get. It is disproportionate. And when we're talking about situations of sexism or racism, it's not the odd occasion. We're talking about when it's systemic.
And the woman is Christina Rad or Jacqueline Glenn, or there are more atheist YouTubers than these two ladies? Or prominent, that's the...
Well, yeah, there's certainly more prominent than those two, but yes, it was one of those two. So, go ahead.
Well,
I'm so glad I got to rant on that.
That's all the questions I've prepared. It was less than 1 hour, and now we have about 40 minutes for your audience questions. Please make the question not longer than half a minute and form it as a question, not as something different. Yeah, it's quite a question. Please.
Hi, so my name is Martin. I happen to agree with your stance on faith as being actually toxic, not really helping. My problem is that people are viewed as, if they're pious, is viewed as positive attribute. Can we do something about that? Can we change that somehow?
At the grassroots level, yes. When I remember growing up and thinking that, anytime somebody showed up with the stereotypical Catholic collar on, everybody's just going to automatically assume, oh, he's a good guy, he's a nice guy, he's the Father Mulcahy in MASH, he's the pacifist. Well, no, we don't see Catholic priests that way anymore, do we? We have a completely different view, right? No, look, there's a Catholic priest out there at the playground. What? Yeah, you're conducting the boys' choir. No, I'm taking my kid out. So, yeah, it's just a matter of understanding, as I said, at the grassroots level, that, that changing perspectives. I mean, the whole thing about being pious, what does that even mean? They're so incredibly hypocritical in every single case, right? Statistically, we know that evangelicals get more divorces than believers, even though they're supposed to preach against divorce, and Jesus forbade it, right? Evangelicals are more likely incarcerated, convicted of felonious crimes, right? I mean, atheists almost not represented in prisons at all. And we know that evangelicals get more abortions than believers, right? They're enormous hypocrites. And primarily the biggest thing is the Christian collective wants very hard to bring in as many people as they can so they can claim the numbers. But when you do that, any collective gets enormously huge, you're going to have people that are not representative of the group, right? So there again, when you get a handful of people that the core will recognize as these are the true Christians, and oops, never mind, that one was just caught going into a hotel room with a rent-a-boy advertising an 8-inch penis. We can't have him in the group anymore. Oh, and this one was just caught doing meth cocaine off of his gay prostitute's ass. Another one we can't include. I'm going to stop ranting.
Yeah, you can It's a famous case, and his explanation was, the devil made me do so, or I remember the case. It was quite...
Even God used that excuse. Look at the Bible. The only time that Satan ever killed anybody, I mean, God killed millions of people for no reason at all, but the only time Satan ever killed anybody in the Bible was because God told him to, right? As part of a bet, right? So God is gambling with people's lives, literally. But at some point, God says the only reason he did this was because he was convinced by Satan to do it, which means that God is saying the devil made me do it. Was there another question?
Like a kid in kindergarten. Billy told me to do it. So, any other question, please? If you want microphone, I can go to you.
Since you're a bit of cultural difference, in Europe, the most dominant is the Catholic Church, where they have the Pope and all the hierarchy. How is it in America when it comes to interpretation of the creationism and the Bible and so? Do they have any sort of central authority who tells them what are they supposed to think, or is it kind of up to them how they interpret the Bible and the stories?
No, I'm sorry to say it's far worse than that. Atheists now outnumber Catholics in the United States. But we don't have any political clout still. What they've replaced that with is not just Protestant Christianity. They don't have a single central head for all of Protestants, because Protestants are divided into all kinds of different denominations. And it's been said that there are as many different denominations of Christianity as there are Christians. And they all make up their own personal Jesus. Right? And I remember one time I gave an example. What if we had a hypothetical technology that could identify or detect, the presence of God and be able to determine exactly what God is and exactly what He isn't? And people objected to that. They objected because they wanted to always be able to say that God is who they say it is, and that God hates exactly what they hate, and God agrees with them on everything, right? And that whatever the afterlife is whatever they wanted to make up about it. It's literally down to everybody's imagination. That's what the whole personal God business is about. And so you have prosperity gospel, where people are just making up excuses to screw each other over for money. It's exactly opposite of what Christianity was ever supposed to be about, right? I mean, American Christians are completely against socialism, which Jesus was for. They're against providing for the poor, which of course Jesus was for. Sell all your clothes and buy for the poor. American Christians aren't about that. They always throw out the slogan about what would Jesus do? I think Jesus would vote for Bernie Sanders. Because he's the Jewish socialist. Like Jesus was. But it's all about making up their own excuses. And one of the biggest criticisms that I have against religion is that it seems to be a denial of accountability. Right? There is the devil made me do it thing, right? It's God's will, right, to make up all these excuses. There's always a way out of owning, and if you can be forgiven for any number of successive crimes if you simply announce on TV that Jesus has forgiven you. So it doesn't matter if you are one of what is that TV show with the people that had way too many kids, and it turned out one of their kids was molesting the other kids. But then he makes an admission that Jesus is forgiven. Oh, okay, well then you don't have to do time in prison then. How is that justified? Did that address your question?
Oh, yeah.
Thanks.
Great. Another question, please.
I would like to ask about the book, The Falsehoods of Creationism. I think, we took like yourself again.
Yes, it's supposed to be out in September.
September.
Yeah, and I don't know any more than I wrote the whole book expecting that it was going to be treated as an audiobook, so that it's not dependent on illustrations. I don't know if illustrations are going to be included, but it doesn't depend on those. And I'm happy with what I wrote. Unfortunately, I haven't got a whole lot of critiques back. Richard Carrier and Robert Price have both written blurbs about it, which were screamingly positive, but they're friends. So I don't know yet. It's frustrating to me that I have to wait months before you, because if you write your own stuff, you'll read your own stuff to death, right? I don't know if it's any good.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
I'm hoping. Was there any others?
I think that was a great question. Another question, please.
Do you think that the obsessive compulsive disorder is one of the sources for religions and conspiracy theories being so viable?
An obsessive compulsive disorder is a source?
OCD.
Well, it could be, I guess. I don't. There's a psychology that I don't really understand, because my wife told me that I have this inability to put myself into other people's shoes, to see something from another person's perspective. If I think your perspective is wrong, it's just wrong, and I can't understand why you think it's right. It's a defect that I have. So while that may be, my thought on this is that from what I've gathered from other people, they want to believe what they want to believe. And they want to believe that the reason that the universe exists is so that they'll exist in it. And that when they die, the universe will cease to exist. And that they will exist forever, even after the universe has faded away, so that they can escape death, and so they can escape accountability, as I mentioned before. There's a great deal of pretend. It's all magical thinking. And I think that, like with the primary religions, the Quran and the Bible, I think they began with people making things out of clay and saying to each other, wouldn't it be great if we could bring these to life? And somebody says, well, maybe if that was possible, then how do we know that that didn't happen to us? Maybe we started out as clay, and somebody makes up a story about it, and then somebody else says, well, we're gonna teach that that's the way it really happened, and we're gonna say that that's a fact, because that's what religion does. Right? It simply asserts blind speculation as if it were true, and just pushes that, and then kills the other guy who says, well, that's just pretend, right? No, shut up. We're gonna push this forever from now. I hope that addresses.
I would like to address the question. You can read or even watch lectures from Robert Sapolsky from Stanford. He is a neurobiologist, and he addresses these issues. If you look at some religious rituals of cleaning, that's the same as the OCD person with cleaning, and their obsession with purity or doing ritual again and again. For example, some of these rituals could be found in a strict kosher restaurant, where you have a person that do nothing. He just controls all the cooks and the personnel, whether they are doing the rituals in a proper way. So it was written quite a lot on this topic, and definitely from the point of cognitive science, there is great research going on the OCD and the religious rituals. So another question, please.
Yeah. I would say that one of the huge problems, in society today, is the problem of political overcorrectness, right? And my question is, how do you see and deal with the argument which says, I'm offended by what you say?
Obviously, I don't care if anybody's offended. No, but there's a two-side to this. I mean, people, what I see in the United States, when people complain about political correctness, they're just looking for an excuse to be assholes. They want to use racial slurs. They want to refer to homosexuals as fags. They want to be crass and insensitive. And I don't want to be that way. Okay. Now, when it comes to religion, I don't care, because religion is I see it as a completely negative collection of lies that only causes harm, and is something that I think needs to be cured in humanity. So when people say that their religious beliefs are threatened, I don't give a damn about that. When you're attacking who someone is, something, religion you can change, and people think that you can't, but I see it all the time. But there are other aspects of your humanity that can't change, or your identity rather, and your sexual orientation is not one of those things that can flip back and forth. For example, your race, certainly not. Your ethnicity, you can't change who your parents were. So if you're going to criticize those things, you ought to have a little bit more presence of mind when you make those kind of statements. As I said, I don't worry too much about political correctness, but I do try to have a little humanity, which compensates for that.
As you worry and Christopher Hitchens said, oh, you are offended, so what? That's not an argument.
Yep. Yeah.
Another question, please. There was one. Yeah.
I have a two-part question. Number of atheists in the United States are growing, and from what I see, the religious ones are kicking around a bit more than there was kicking around in the past. They are much more offensive these days, or not? And the second part, I think there's a first openly atheist senator in the United States. When do you think you will be having a candidate for president, atheist?
I think we already have one, but for obvious reasons, he can't be openly atheist. When I was a little kid, there was a TV show on. I'm sure you guys didn't get it, but it was called Perry Mason, and the Perry Mason character was a lawyer who was very compassionate about. You have seen it? Yeah. He's a character who's very compassionate about people, but as soon as anybody starts talking woo, the eyebrow goes up. So he doesn't have time for the nonsense. I would like to see a grassroots response. That anytime somebody talks about how they believe that the end times are coming, no, that person is immediately written off as crazy. You don't get to run for a president. You don't get to a position of authority at all. We're going to put you in a safety padded room. This is the way I think people should be treated when they talk about, that they believe in talking snakes and demons and demonic possession, which a lot of these people do. They have to understand that they use this language now. Even people who don't believe it use this language now because they know that at the grassroots level lots of other people do. So they'll pander to them. But when the populace as a whole folds their arms up, oh no, wait. As soon as you say something like that, well then the politicians are going to have to change course. I would like to see that day happen, and I think it's coming soon. One of the things that we're promoting recently is the Reason Rally coming up on June 4th. This is the second Reason Rally that we've had, and what we're trying to do is gain attention for the fact that irreligious secularists represent at least a quarter of the United States, which means nothing in Europe. I understand you guys, you dominate everything supposedly, but it's a big deal for us because we're climbing from the 10% or less range, and we're asking to be recognized, and we want to criticize people who hold extreme beliefs like that as whack jobs. I hope that addressed your question.
Thank you. Another question, please. Go on.
I didn't do it, I was over.
Okay. So, continue. Magic.
hele, já nemůžu. Díky.
Do you think that it's harder here in Europe to counter some claims of many authority figures in the church and elsewhere? That they claim that we need to return to some Christian values because we have to be more moral and so forth. Because of the history of the continent, the church played such a big part in, as opposed to America, which technically has been a secular nation.
You have direct evidence of what the Christian values resulted in, don't you? And it's much more prevalent in Europe than it is in the United States. I mean, we always talk about how the Puritans and the Quakers came over, fleeing religious persecution, but we don't talk about the fact that they immediately started persecuting each other, right, as soon as they got there. In Europe, what we had is when the church began to lose its hold and its influence and its popularity with the populace, the result was the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, right, and technology. So yeah, let's return to the days of Dark Ages and ignorance. Going back to trying to evoke some kind of purity or more moral stance, returning to Jesus. When was that ever the case? Again, when you look at the levels of the crime rates in the most religious areas versus the least religious areas, you see the correlation. Statistically, belief in God makes you a worse person. And we've seen from the Clergy Project in the United States that there's a clergy project where ministers no longer believe their own nonsense, but they don't have a means of sustaining themselves other than by preaching to the choir. So they find another outlet. Now what they've discovered is all these people, regardless how hardcore they may have been when they were believers, when they come away from the belief, they find themselves voting more liberally and being more tolerant of homosexuals and a number of other things, being more curious, for example, and starting to want to understand the way things really are. So, returning to Christian values, I think it's a bastardization of the word value to even apply it in that sense, because it certainly isn't an upgrade. They're asking you to revert to some kind of a primitive ideology that is only oppressive.
Thank you. Slávek has 2 kids, so he's quite used to taking care of broken glass. I don't know that
all the way down, too. Whoever broke that broke it good.
I have another question, but information about how religious Czech people are from our own data set of about 12,000 people that filled our survey on the internet. It's a part of my research, and the quite interesting information. The same data has a census that is made every 10 years in Czech or in every other European country, and American Gallup poll has or Pew Research has a quite similar number as well. It means that about 60% of Czechs are unbelievers, 21% are nuns. It means that they are not part of any religion, but they are not unbelievers. So 20% that believes in something, whatever, magical. We have 10% of Catholics and 1% of evangelics, and 0.4% of another has said it's
Muslim, Hindu, or etc.
No. It's a different kind of Christians, and 6.5% are describing themselves as the different. But the different means that Jedi Knights, Satanists, whatever. Usually, I believe in something, and that it's greater than we, that bonds the universe together. I said, well, that's gravity, not your belief system that brings the universe together.
Isn't it great that we have a poll that puts Jedi Knights and Muslims in the same category?
Well, the reason is the reason is that there is so few of the people that we let them to fill exact their beliefs, but just to show the balls, I just sum the number up to the 6.5% as the others. But my point is that 60% describe themselves as non-believers, and only Catholics are 10%. All the other religions are less than 1%, so they are completely irrelevant. That's the data of the Czech Republic.
You know, I got to tell you, I was an atheist for 15 years before I realized what an atheist was. I had been lied to about what that word meant. I was told that atheists believe in nothing, and I don't know what that means. So I think that they've just there's Zen or something. We're all nihilists. We don't believe we ourselves exist. I was told that atheist has an unreasonable stance, objecting to any possibility that there could be anything that we haven't been able to prove. Well, how would you embrace an unrealistic position? By definition, it's unreasonable, right? So I couldn't call myself an atheist. And eventually I found out that what it means is simply somebody who does not believe in a God. Not just somebody that believes there is no God, but lacks a belief in God. And this is an important point. I would wish that we had a poll like yours, because we have the ones where which religion are you, and there's an option for none, but we don't have the question, are you convinced that an actual deity really exists? Because if we had that question phrased exactly that way, we would find out that we had a hell of a lot more atheists. Because I talk to people who answer that way, who insist that they are not atheist. I had one friend, a dear friend forever, who says, I'm not convinced that there's a God, but I'm not convinced there's not one either. As if that changes anything. I'm sorry, the A word applies. I know you hate it. It's kind of like the feminism label, you know. They hate the label, but that's what the definition means. If the definition describes you, then it applies to you. So, an atheist, you have to understand that a belief is a conviction. So a lack of belief is a lack of conviction. So if you're not convinced, there's the belief. And is it an actual deity? Because people will argue that, well, I believe there's something. Well, we all believe there's something. Is it a God? You know, well, what is a God? It's a magical anthropomorphic immortal. You know, look up the definition. There's actually a poll of the American scientists where there was a number of people who said that they didn't believe in a God, but they believed in a higher power. Oddly enough, a higher power than a God. So what is that, a force? We're talking about
gravity. That's the force that brings all the universe together.
I'm not going to do the Obi-Wan Kenobi chant right now. But the point is, you know, that there's a distinction between believing in something. That there's, you know, even the Einstein/Spinoza concept of God, which is the collection of the laws of the universe. Even if you believe in that, that's not a God, because a God is a magical anthropomorphic immortal. It has an intelligence, it has a purpose, it has a design.
That answers prayers.
Exactly. And
knows everything. And it's the greatest being, the most ethical.
And people will argue that, you know, certain gods, that my definition is wrong because certain gods die. Yeah, but they come back, don't they? You know, Zeus came back as a whole bunch of different animals. You know, Dionysus was killed and then reborn again. You know, Dionysus II, literally, the sequel to himself. You know, we have lots of mythology like this. So that's
and crackers became God in Catholic churches. Yeah.
Crackers. Oh,
yeah. The transubstantiation.
Okay. Was there any other questions? Yes.
I would like to ask you about Texas Atheists and their organization, or how many of you are there in Texas? How many atheists do you know, or how you are organized in USA and Texas?
Yeah, well, we're trying to be very well organized. As I said, we've got a coalition of a couple dozen different groups just in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And we have another similar collection in Austin and a couple of the other cities. Houston, where they have a church in Houston. I mean, they got lots of mega churches. You know what a mega church is? A megachurch is where the combination or the congregation exceeds 2,000, right? I have been in churches that have 7,500 seats in my neighborhood. 7,500 seats, right? That's a church.
Yeah.
That's scary. We went to one that held 16,000 seats. That's in Houston. That's Joel Osteen's. But we also have, conversely, the largest humanist organization and the largest geographic atheist collection. About 2,200 people thereabouts. So there's huge groups. In the places where it is the most overtly religious, where it's the most oppressive, where they initiate the most laws against the most people, you find that it's polarizing. And it reminds me again of Star Wars, you know, when they say, you know, the tighter you clench your grip, the more sleeps through your fingers. It's kind of like a reaction to that. If you had a situation where religion was not offensive and it didn't control everything, everybody would be completely tolerant and peaceful about it. But in situations where women's reproductive rights are prohibited by law, where they're faced with a criminal investigation if you have a miscarriage, and some places are like that. If a woman has a miscarriage, she has to go up on a murder trial or similar examination.
You mean, I'm sorry, you mean a miscarriage like by nature?
Yes. You then have to be investigated by the police.
And am I like a murderer for every period I have or something?
Interesting notion there. when they talk
like if that would apply to that, you know, it's basically the same.
For some reason,
it's just that the baby dies even before you have the chance to miscarriage.
Yeah, but there are places that are trying to push laws so that women would be treated as murder suspects simply by having a miscarriage.
What about men and condoms? It's
well,
like
for whatever reason,
or just masturbation.
well, for whatever reason, sperm should be qualified the same way as eggs are, but nobody's being convicted of cannibalism.
Well, it's technically not a tissue. Like
she's going to analyze it.
Those biologists. Well, another question, please. Go on.
I'm wondering, what is your approach to discussing with people who believe because of some kind of personal experience? They have some feeling, they think they have some personal link to God. What's your approach to discussing with them? Do you address also their faith, or do you focus on the doctrine they believe?
Most people ignore their own doctrine. It does not matter what the Bible says. I mean, I will point out to people, they'll all tell me that, you know, the Bible says this, and I say, no, it doesn't. Well, yes, it does. Okay, fine, show me. And then they won't, because they know it doesn't. And then I'll say what the Bible does say, and they'll say, no, it doesn't. And I'll say, yep, get out the Bible. I'll say, no, then they won't let me. Then they'll throw the Bible away to prevent me from getting to it. When Mormon missionaries came over to visit me, you know, I'm like showing people this paper that they left me when they left. So you believe this, and this? No, we don't believe that, right? Rip the paper out of my hand, throw it in the trash, stand between me and the trash so that I can't get the paper to prove that I'm right. So the person who's standing between me and the trash knows that I'm right, and knows that I know that she knows that I'm right. But they're still playing this game. So the doctrine doesn't mean anything. They will pick and choose however they want to. They'll interpret it however necessary. As far as personal experiences, though, I was a neo-pagan occultist once upon a time, and I had really dramatic experiences of astral projection, of entities visiting me, you know, all these, the psychic power that you build up in the palms of your hands that you can then release onto other people, and all of these kind of things. Reading auras was nothing, right? I was way beyond that. And I don't want to get into all the details right now because it's embarrassingly silly, the things that I believe that I actually experienced. But the thing is that I remember these things. And these personal experiences compelled me for many, many years to believe absolute nonsense because I remembered these things. And then through the magic of the internet, you reconnect with people that you haven't met in decades. And these were people who shared these experiences with me. And yet, coincidentally, they are now in the same position I am in that they're completely rationalist. and they don't believe any of that anymore. I had to come to the painful decision that what I remember happening didn't happen, because it couldn't happen. Even though I remember it happening, it couldn't happen. And so I had to wrestle with that quandary. And then I met these people that shared these experiences with me, and they don't remember it at all. I thought they were going to confirm what I remember. No. Shut it down. That never happened. What do I do with that? This was way more dramatic than any Christian's tale that I've ever heard. And even about things about where they supposedly were healed, there's always a natural healing process. It's okay, so the cancer went into remission just like cancer typically does. You know, cut off a finger, watch it grow back. Does that happen? No. You know, God doesn't heal amputees. Why? Because God can only do things that can normally happen without a God. God helps those who help themselves, and that's it. Because God doesn't actually ever do anything. I hope that was your question.
Thank you for a great answer. So another question, please. Do we have one? Go on.
What would be your strategy against theists, especially physicists who have this belief in a God represented as a set of laws?
How is that God?
Yeah, I mean, I have the same opinion. It's just, you can have scientists and they work in physics or some like primary field. They still hold a belief, like in a completely separate part of their being, right? And they still maintain both.
So for whatever reason, there are a number of scientists who still believe in God. They tend to be mathematicians and engineers. And for whatever reason, biologists and geologists, who are the people that you would normally expect to be, if there was any truth to creation at all, then geologists and biologists would be the ones that had that information. But no, 99.86% of all Earth and life scientists give no credence to creationism whatsoever. And the only scientists who do give credence to creationism are the engineers, the people who design things themselves. So they sort of imagine their own handiwork in the processes of the universe, I guess. I don't know. Because I take a more biological aspect of it. And when you look at biology, there's no indication of creator at all. And just to be really, really simplistic about that, why would an intelligent designer put a sewage system running through an amusement park? As an example, referring to genitalia. All right, anyone?
Thank you. Please.
I would like to ask you, what do you think why political right is more religious than left?
The political right is more interested in controlling people, and religion is a means of manipulating the masses. I mean, if you're trying to be liberal, then religion is not a great tool for you. But when you control people best through fear and propaganda, then religion is the best tool that you can possibly get. Are we done?
Thank you. So you've
There's one more back there.
Yeah. So if you have some continuation to that question, so yeah.
I'd like to ask, even if the religion is about lies, many people find hope when they feel miserable. Religion helps them to deal with the situation. Do you think that something else could be instead of religion and help people who feel miserable to find hope and not being lied?
I don't remember what I said about not being able to put myself in other people's shoes. There are people who want to believe what they want to believe because it makes them happy, because they have an emotional need to believe that, because it gives them comfort somehow. These are the explanations that I've heard. But for me, why would I want to believe something that is not even probably true? That just means that I'm being fooled. And it's no surprise that the Bible and the Quran both use the opposite definition of fool than the dictionary does. Because as I understand the word fool, it is somebody who too readily accepts improbable claims from questionable sources on insufficient evidence, and that's what the Bible and the Quran both provide. So if other people can gain some pleasure out of believing absolute nonsense, then I pity them. And I would allow them to go on and do that on a personal level. But my objection comes from the people that are trying to teach it as fact to other people's kids.
Maybe the question was whether we can find some replacement as that provides us with care and hope. We call it social system, or some insurance that you can have from by all secular means. That it's quite common in Europe. If you are sick in Czech Republic, the government, it means that all other people around you pays the medicine for you.
That's socialism.
Yes. Well,
honestly, when I was a kid, I had an idea of what communism was. And I knew that there was something different about socialism, but I didn't know what socialism was. So I asked people, you know, my family, my babysitters, whatever, when I was a little kid, what's socialism? How is it different than communism? And the only answer I ever got was, well, they're both just as bad.
Well, the political discussion is quite for the different evening. There is a quite striking difference between vocabulary definition and the real socialism that we have here. That people actually dies trying to escape from it. The question is, well, I think for different time, I suppose. So.
And a different speaker. I don't know politics that well.
Yeah. Please, do we have another question?
Nope, we're done.
Go on.
I would like to ask, what do you think, is it a good idea to try some atheist party? Atheist party, strictly atheist
Political power, whether it's a good idea to make an atheist political party.
I was once a representative for the National Atheist Party in the United States. And I'm sorry to say, they started out as the National Atheist Party. They were supposed to change to the Secular Party of America or something like that. I can't remember what the name they were going to change to was. And there were people that were very strong on the atheist term, but I knew that just atheist wasn't going to grow to the numbers that you need to have if you're going to actually have any political influence. So secularist includes religious believers who understand that the importance of the separation of church and state. And that's what I was suggesting that they do. People agreed with my suggestion. However, when they didn't quite get the vote that they wanted to change it, they fudged the numbers, which grievously dishonest, destroyed the party. Everybody abandoned it immediately. Something similar happened with the Democratic Party. They held a convention where they said they were going to include the references to God in the Democratic Party platform. And they wanted to get people to cheer whether they supported this idea. And they had a cheer in favor, and they asked for the cheer in objection, right, which was way louder. So people really objected to including this the God reference in the platform. But that was already written into the script. They'd already decided they were going to do it regardless of what the cheer was. So they went ahead with it anyway. And this is one of many reasons why I don't identify as a Democrat. I identify as independent or green.
Just a footnote about situation in the Czech Republic. We have openly atheist and secular politician in the right to the left political spectrum. So we have atheists in the economically right parties and of course in the left parties, in the Greens, in the middle. So this question is quite solved in our country.
I wish that we had a process wherein, political representatives, if they're going to be leaders and sovereigns and judges, then they need to be rational. They can't be what, Americans want to elect people who are strong in their beliefs and firm in their convictions. But if that's the case, then they've already judged your situation before they heard the evidence. They don't need to hear the evidence. So what we should be looking for is quite something different. So I wish that there was something that would eliminate all of our current Republican candidates from ever having had a chance to run. So if you're going to be in charge of other people's lives and the environment and our powers and all of these other things, then you need to show that you are an incredibly rational well thought out person who will consider that you might be wrong, you know, a rational person. Yes.
You said one of the candidates for US president is probably atheist, and you don't have any, it's not public, so who do you think is atheistic candidate? For
Really, you don't know? Okay.
I don't know.
Several times people have asked Bernie Sanders what his religious beliefs are. And thus far, he has only said that, of course I have religious faith. I believe, my religious faith is that we're all in this together. Does that sound like a belief in God to you?
But people say he's Jewish.
Every Jew I know is an atheist. Now it's a small sample. You know, I live in Texas. We don't have Jews. We ran them out years ago. But it's serious. There aren't that many Jewish people in the United States who are devoutly religious compared to those who identify as secular Jews, which means atheist.
So maybe you take Jews like an ethnicity or something, because that's actually what we kind of do here. Because here, well, not now, but you know, in the war and stuff, it was not about the faith; it was about ethnicity.
Yeah.
So maybe him being Jewish also means just that, I don't know, his parents were Jewish or whatever.
Yeah, Jews are kind of unique in that, you know, they are a combination of an ethnicity and a culture and a faith all of it. But, you know, I know Jewish people who are very proud to be Jewish, and they're very proud of their Jewish history. They don't hold to the beliefs, but they still do some of the rituals, because that's just something you do. I mean, how many of you still put up Christmas trees? You know how I finally gave up? I put up a Christmas tree 3 years ago and never took it down. It's still there in my living room right now. It's just not a really big one. But there are people that I met a couple that were Hindu, and I was excited to meet them because I had some questions about the Mahabharata. You know, and so I started asking them about the story, and I couldn't remember exactly where in the book it was, and I started giving the details of the story, and they stopped me and I said, "We're Hindu because our parents are Hindu, not because we believe it." And I had a friend who said he was Christian for the same reason. He says, "I'm Christian because I like to believe that, not because I think it's true." So that's why I said, if we had a poll question, you know, are you convinced that an actual deity really exists? How many Hindus and Jews and Christians would actually turn out to be atheists in that case? I think most of the atheists in the United States don't know they're atheists. They think they're Methodists.
Just another footnote about elections in Czech Republic. One of the least important questions about the candidate is his personal belief or faith in God or some deity. Nobody cares. So there is no active discrimination against any faith, or there is no support for non-believers. Just nobody cares what the candidate believes about deity.
Now, I would like to be as open-minded as that, but I want to be fair too. I mean, so if somebody comes up and if somebody's running for a political office and they believe that the powers that be are really extraterrestrial reptiles disguised as humans, you know, I think that kind of belief should be on the same criteria as believing that the Earth was created magically 6,000 years ago. I think that they're the same level of crazy, and they should, you know, just qualifications should apply. All right, we done?
Actually, it breaks crazy old meter. So we spent about 2 hours with our discussion. If you are satisfied with the answers you gave, I think that we can close with the great applause for you. Thank you very much.
Before everybody leaves, how many scientists are in the room?
Yes.